Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I have with me actually a returning guest to Evanston Live TV, psychotherapist Joyce Marter. Welcome back, Joyce.
Thank you, Malika. I'm so honored to be with you tonight. I so appreciate it, always.
Yes, yes. I was so excited. We had a lot of feedback with just posting about tonight's conversation. People were like, oh, this is a great idea. And, you know, um, yeah, yeah. So apparently there's quite a few people that need some information on depression during this time period. Or would you call seasonal blues? Would you call that depression? Or what do you call that?
Well, I think that right now, this is such a timely topic because we are living through a global trauma with the pandemic. So it's not just the simple holiday blues, it's holiday blues during COVID, where
Mhm.
we've already been isolated from loved ones and we've been sheltering in place, and our holidays are not the same this year. And as the weather is turning more gray and cold here in Evanston, people are homebound more, which can be depressing. So, yeah, the seasonal affective disorder, kind of seasonal blues, that's just kind of feeling low because of the changes in the weather and things like light therapy, getting outside or ordering one of those lights off of Amazon to put on your desk to get some vitamin D can really help with that. Taking vitamin D supplements is helpful. And I think it's just important for us, even if it's cold and yucky outside, to get outside, to bundle up, walk around the block. It's really good for our mental health and our physical health. And then, yes, some people experience the holiday blues or even depression at this time of year, which depression is more of a clinical diagnosis. And that's if people are experiencing difficulty sleeping, changes in weight or appetite. Maybe they feel irritable or sad or kind of apathetic, like not finding joy. And I think a lot of people feel pressure to feel joyful this time of year. And it's a tough time, especially in 2020, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. We are definitely in some uncertain times. Unemployment, people feeling bad. They worked so hard all their lives and they're finding themselves in food bank lines, because they didn't see this coming. They didn't see that they were going to be laid off. That was just not in the plans for a lot
Not at
of people.
Absolutely. The unemployment and the financial stress of the pandemic has
Hmm.
been extraordinarily stressful for people. And the holidays really brings that out. And that affects your sense of safety in the world, your sense of value and worth in the world, and your health and well-being. It's a real trauma to not have food to put on your table and be worried about, a lot of people aren't paying their mortgages now, or they're worried about, a short sale or getting evicted. And that's terrifying.
Hmm. So, what do you say to people? Is your conversation different to people who are for the first time experiencing depression because of COVID? Um, People who are going through the seasonal holiday blues, um, as opposed to people who have chronic depression, clinical depression.
It is different for each person. And again, I am such a believer in, personally, I think we all deal with mental health issues as part of the human condition at different points in our lives. No shame, no blame, no stigma.
Mhm.
It's a normal response to our nature and our nurture. And we all have different stressors that we've been handed. So I think in life, we're all dealt a different hand of hardships and blessings.
Mhm.
And some of us have intergenerational trauma and other family traumas that we're born into. We might be born with more or less resources. We might be born into families that are dealing with addiction or alcoholism or other problems. And so we each have our own histories, our own psychosocial histories that have shaped and molded us into who we are. And interestingly, one of the things that I love about being a therapist is I believe in the recovery and the resilience of the human spirit. So I find that people who've gone through tough challenges and have learned to move through them, to tap into deeper parts of themselves and into their communities and into the support of others, have wisdom carved into their being, so I always look at the silver lining that yes, these are extremely challenging times, and I want to thank you for opening conversations about mental health, because we need to talk honestly about this, because really I think all of us are suffering, and I certainly see that in my practice. But you're absolutely right. If somebody has a history of depression, then what they're going through right now might tap into that previous trauma or their previous history. And if somebody's never been through it before, they might not know how to handle it. I was walking with a girlfriend a couple months ago, and she said, "I'm so glad I'm an alcoholic." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I've been in AA for years, so I have tools for how to deal with this stuff." But normal people, people who aren't in recovery, or people who are in recovery are normal as well. It's a normal part of the human condition to deal with addiction, and many of us do, and many of our loved ones do. But she was saying she was grateful for having the skills that she learned through her program, which I think is awesome.
Oh, wow. Well, she found a silver lining.
Yeah.
She found a silver lining. So, Joyce, we've been hearing a lot about relationships breaking up during the quarantine, during COVID period. Couples are really getting to know each other again and figuring out, what, I don't like you, and so they're breaking up. Um, People experiencing just being alone because they can't be out and about anymore, and they don't actually like being alone.
Yeah.
Um, God, how what is that? Well, one, uh, I'm a loner, so I have no problems with being alone. I have no problems with it. Um, I like being around people, but I am perfectly cool with being by myself. But you have those who, my God, it's like death for them to be alone. What can you explain that and maybe talk to our viewers out there who relate to that? They just cannot be alone for long periods of time.
Right. Well, I think it has to do with whether we're an extrovert or more introverted, or there's a term that's kind of a hybrid that's an ambivert. And I hadn't heard about that until recent years. But introverts tend to do very well on their own. They can enjoy, being in and doing their own thing, doing their work and having solitude, and that's peaceful and recharging for them. But extroverts get their energy and their joy from connecting with other people. So I think this time is particularly tough for extroverts who might be living alone. And so they're not being able to socialize, or maybe they're single, and dating is certainly different during COVID when thinking about safety concerns, et cetera. And so a lot of people are experiencing loneliness. And so in my practice, I talk a lot about the importance of accessing support, participating in online events like yours, joining support groups online, 12-step programs like AA that I mentioned, or Codependence Anonymous or Al Anon are all available. There's support groups for depression and anxiety available. And teletherapy is covered by insurance, and people can talk to a therapist like myself over video, over Zoom and other platforms. And some insurance companies like Aetna have waived the copay entirely. So, and there's even, I can share it with you toward the end. There's United Healthcare has a 1-800 number for people who don't have insurance. There's community mental health centers that offer video counseling and things for people who may need a sliding fee program or pro bono services, et cetera. But this is a time for us really to reach out for support. And you're absolutely right that relationships are under stress, because many of us who are in relationships and living with a partner, or living with children, or living with our parents are working from home and living from home all the time. And so it's a tremendous amount of togetherness, with some logistical challenges with kids who are e-learning, and And people are under stress. People are scared of getting the virus. People may be dealing with the virus. They may have lost loved ones to the virus. So there's a lot of fear and concern for health and safety. There's financial stress, as we've mentioned. So unfortunately, the research is showing that there is an increase in domestic violence and child abuse. So this is really serious. This is really a time for people to take a step back and zoom out and look at the big picture and realize we are living through an extraordinarily stressful, traumatic time. And there's no way that our minds and bodies can fully process all the changes and all the information that we're being inundated with. And that's affecting our mental health, it's affecting our relational health. And so couples are having conflict.
Mm, mm. So okay. So I'm gonna ask you two scenarios. So going back to those extroverts who it's, they just can't handle being with themselves. Um, Someone like me, I don't have your training. I'm not skilled. I don't have the tools that you have. But some people, those people will come to you because you're their friend. So what do I say to them other than, you know, I know someone you should talk to, Joyce Marter, but what what can I say in the meantime until they're ready to contact you? I mean, there were so many who were interested in talking to you today, and I think that whole depression thing is like they don't want people to know.
Right, there's unfortunately still shame and secrecy
Mhm,
about it, but,
mhm,
I've dealt with depression.
mhm,
I've taken antidepressants before. I lost my mom, I went through horrible grief and depression. I think we all experience things at different points in our lives. That does not mean we're crazy. It is a normal part of the human experience, and there are medications, there's counseling and therapy that can help just our mental health, just like there is for our physical health.
mhm,
And no shame in that. I think seeing a counselor is like going to the dentist or the doctor or a personal trainer for your mind or your relationships.
mhm,
So, yes, if a friend or a loved one or a colleague starts to share with you that they're feeling down or they're not feeling like themselves or they're struggling with some mental health issues, the first thing to do is to respond with empathy. So to really listen and really be present to them, instead of, giving them half your attention, as we sometimes do, to really be with them and to really honor what their emotional experience is.
mhm,
And while you may not respond in the same way, and you may have different emotional responses to the challenges of the pandemic, we're all human beings, and you can understand what it's like to be sad or afraid or frustrated or angry or to feel hopeless or powerless. So to reflect to somebody like, I understand that you're feeling really alone right now, and that must feel really horrible. You're honoring that you've heard them, that you understand what they're feeling, and willingness to listen, to just be present and let someone share. There's a lot of power in that, and I think that's a big part of what being a therapist is. We give our undivided attention and care and compassion to the clients that we're working with, and that's extraordinarily healing. It's also important to not minimize. So I think sometimes people are like, oh gosh, I think my friend's having a problem. She doesn't seem like herself, but they don't want to offend the person. So they err on the side of not saying anything. And
mhm,
and that's a real risk because we're living in a time where the suicide rate is the highest it's been in 30 years. And
mhm,
with COVID, they're anticipating 150,000 deaths of despair, people who are feeling so scared about their finances or their health or so alone that they're thinking of hurting themselves. So we don't want to ignore if we have kids or family members or loved ones who are not seeming themselves. We want to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm noticing these changes in you, and I'm concerned. I notice that you're sleeping a lot, or I notice that you are telling me that you're feeling exhausted or really down lately, or you don't feel like getting together with friends. And, maybe you should talk to someone. I've talked to someone. I think it's helpful. I think we all need it at different points in our lives. No judgment. Again, does not mean you're crazy, or you think the person's crazy or anything like that. It's actually the more caring and compassionate thing to do, to take them seriously and show that you've noticed that something's off.
Mm, mm. Yeah, you never quite know what to say in those situations, but that's helpful. Just pretty much listening, being that ear and acknowledging, I've noticed you haven't been yourself lately, and then just listen to them. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
help is available and it's effective. And you could say, I heard Joyce talk, and there's a bunch of different resources out there, and I'd be happy to pull those up for you. How can I be a support for you? Some people don't know how to ask for what they need. So to say, would you like me to text you every day? Would you like to check in? What is it that I can provide for you that would be a support to you during this time? And it's also important to know you don't have to be somebody's therapist, and nor should you. If you're not trained, that's too much responsibility for you. So you don't need to diagnose a person and say, I think you might be depressed, or I think you might have ADD, or I think you're having panic attacks. You can just say, it sounds like you're having some mental health symptoms, which is understandable. Like, how can we not during this time? And help is available.
Mm, mm. And as far as the couples, I think I'm hearing more couples are having a problem than couples coming closer together. I know a few where it's really brought them together, and they have like this newfound love and union and devotion. And then it's quite a few of them out there. I was like, I don't know if they're gonna make it. The vaccine needs to come quick. So like, what I mean, how do you talk to a friend that's going through, marital relationship issues? Do you tell them to stick it out, or what do you
I
say?
It's different in different situations because, of course, what if somebody was in a violent situation and they were in an abusive relationship? You wouldn't want to say, stick it out. And
Right,
we don't
right.
always know what people are dealing with. So I think just encouraging people to take really good care of themselves. I know it sounds very simple, but making sure they're getting enough sleep, they're having proper nutrition, they're exercising, they're getting enough support, they're having some work-life balance. They're not working 100 hours a week and exhausting and depleting themselves, because the more depleted they are, the less they're going to have to give in their relationship, and the lower their coping skills are going to be. So we have an ethical responsibility to take care of ourselves first. And I think as women, and I think for mothers or parents, sometimes we take care of other people before we take care of ourselves, and that's not good for ourselves or our relationships. And
Mm,
then the second thing I would say is just to zoom out, that in this moment your partner may seem like the most annoying human being ever, but if you zoom out and you look at what we're dealing with right now and the history of your whole relationship, and that hopefully with the vaccine at some point this will shift, this will pass, and we'll be under less stress and more likely to recover. So I think it's a time for emotional intelligence, which is our ability to manage our own emotional process in a way that reflects personal integrity and also empathy and compassion for others, and kind of nuance the relationship, the communication in the relationship. And I do think this is a time to not sweat the small stuff, to let some things go. I think a really useful tool is detachment. which is the ability to observe somebody and their stuff and not absorb it. To kind of, if your partner's not in a good space or they're agitated or whatever it is, learning how to kind of be a duck and let that roll off of you rather than reacting to it, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm pretty good at detaching. Some people are not good at detaching. Uh, how do you teach someone to detach? Because I find detaching is survival.
Yes.
Like, you have no access. Whatever you got going on, I deny access. So, but some people absolutely cannot do that. They take in everything. I mean, no one's made of steel. We're all still human, but some people, like, they absolutely take in everything. So how do you teach a person to detach and be like, I deny access?
Well, it's a long lesson. And I will tell you, I am 100% the opposite of you. And I am not great at detachment. And when I was in graduate school and learning to be a therapist, my own supervisor said to me, she was like, Joyce, you're really good at breathing people's stuff in, but you have to learn how to breathe it out.
Wow.
And that's what it is. It's letting go of all that's not yours to carry.
Mm,
I love practicing yoga, which is like meditation with movement.
mhm,
And once before a yoga practice, I set the intention to release all the yuck that I was holding that wasn't mine. And after that practice, I felt like 1,000 pounds had been removed from me, and I came home and took a 3 hour nap. There
mm,
are ways through exercise, through meditation, through breath that we can clear our energy in our bodies and let go. I'm a big believer in the serenity prayer and the wisdom of the serenity prayer. Not necessarily in a religious way, but in a philosophical way of, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
mm,
So we cannot change other people. We can't change their thoughts. We can't change their feelings. We can't change their behaviors. We
mm,
can't change COVID.
mm,
So, but we can empower ourselves to change everything within us. We can change our thinking to be more positive. We can change the way that we manage our emotions so that it's more effective and helpful for us and for our relationships. We can change our communication. We can change our self care. We can nurture our support networks and plug into them. So there's a lot that we can do. But if we spin our wheels focusing on feeling frustrated with someone else, we're not going to do the work on ourselves that we need to do to grow and move forward.
mm, mm. Interesting, interesting. I totally agree with you on the yoga too, as a way to breathe it out. That little bit that gets in, you gotta release it. You gotta release it, or it will eat you alive.
I loved one time I was at Target. This is kind of a funny example, but
Mm.
the woman in front of me was super rude to the cashier. This was pre-pandemic, and she was yelling at him and I think even calling him names. And he was completely chill. Just continued to check her out. He was polite to her, didn't look bothered at all. And when it got to be my turn, I said, first of all, I'm so sorry that that woman was so rude to you. And I said, and secondly, how the heck did you do that? Like, and he said, oh, I don't let anyone in my head who isn't paying rent. Right? Isn't that
Mhm.
that's detachment. That's like, okay, you're over there, you got your stuff. It's not about me. I'm not going to take it on. I'm not going to react to it. I'm not going to let it ruin my mood or
Mhm.
my space. And so that's what we all need to kind of practice at this time. It's tough. It's a practice.
Mhm. That is a practice. Um, someone else had brought up to me, um, dealing with uh, just negative people who are close to you. So you have the store clerk. It's easier to deny access to strangers. I can do that all day.
Yeah.
But when you have people, that you work with, or um, that you're friends with, people that you're having to be around, and it's just like a evil core to them.
Yes.
How now that you can deny access, but you still have to deal with them for
Right.
hours on end or really work with them. That can that can get heavy. That can get heavy. And the next thing you know, you're like, I don't want to talk to people. I hate people right now.
Right. You're having to deal with a lot of toxicity like that. That would be a normal response. And it is much harder when it's somebody that's in your family or somebody in if it's your boss or at your work that you really can't avoid being with them, then, it really does become extra important to have those self-care practices, to take a mindful moment and meditate at your desk, reboot. I love apps like Calm and Headspace, and YouTube has a bunch of free meditations available. But to take those little breaks so it's not building, 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 and then learning how to set healthy boundaries in those relationships, learning how to say no, how to set time limits and maybe informational limits, and those types of things. I really like the work of doctors Cloud and Townsend. They have a website at cloudandtownsend.com, and they've written a bunch of books on boundaries and how to set boundaries in a healthy way. And I know for myself, I'm kind of a recovering people pleaser. So I would often allow my own boundaries to become compromised in hopes that I would make somebody else happy or make them like me more. But then I would become resentful and exhausted and depleted, which isn't good for me or the relationship. So I've had to work at being more assertive and communicating in a way that demonstrates not only respect for the other person, but respect for myself. And so learning how to be diplomatic and honest and boundaried and let someone know where your lines are. And there's no reason to apologize for those. We need to have boundaries in order to be safe and well.
What do you think is going to be majority of the people, our mind, our frame of mind when we come out of COVID? Well, one, the vaccine. Maybe you can break down to people why some people just are not trying to take the they fear it. They don't trust it. It sounds suspect. Well, especially when Trump was promoting it. But
Right.
just I was like, I'm not taking any vaccine that he promotes.
Right.
But
Especially
yeah,
motive.
just vaccines, period. Some people, I mean, there's history to it. I mean, for the Black community, the Tuskegee Airmen,
Yeah.
I mean, the Tuskegee experiment. We've got bad history with vaccines.
Matt.
So people are like coming at people who are questioning the vaccine, coming at them crazy, like so insensitive. There's um, there's trauma to vaccines for some groups of people, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely, Malika. So you're demonstrating compassion for the
Mhm.
group of people who may fear a vaccine, and I think that that's a normal response. I have a friend who's the mother of an autistic son, and I know in the autism community there's some question about what role vaccines may or may not play, and so I think there's a lot of reasons that people might have some health anxiety about that. And I think, our political climate of late has shown us that it can be really challenging to be in relationships with people who have very different views and perspectives. And so it is difficult to have compassion sometimes and empathy and be able to see through somebody else's lens. But we need to do that. We need to listen, and we need to not judge, and have compassion and understanding that people are going to have different responses to the vaccine and different feelings about it. And I'm not sure what it's going to be like. I think a lot of people are going to deal with health anxiety and social anxiety. I think we've been so holed up that I think some people will be bursting at the seams to go out and do things again, and I think a lot of people will be pretty gun shy. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects our social relationships.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's I think we're about to step into a whole new reality. Um when the vaccine, some people are going to get the vaccine, some people are not going to get the vaccine. Like, what is that going to look like? Um, God, we are really in some uncertain times.
I love the work of Deepak Chopra on dealing with uncertainty. And uncertainty is really hard for us human beings.
Mm,
We, as a group, don't like uncertainty and change. And right now, this is a time of extraordinary uncertainty and change. But leaders like Deepak Chopra say that when there's uncertainty, or Lao Tzu is an ancient Chinese philosopher who's written a lot of cool stuff about it, that when there's change and uncertainty, there's opportunity for innovation and powerful change, for
mm,
creativity, for new ways. And so, I definitely am a positive person who believes that, through all this suffering that we're going through collectively in different ways, that my hope is the silver lining is people are talking about important things like racial injustice issues, and talking about, you know, discrimination in healthcare, and talking about mental health issues, and talking about things that have been systemically kind of quieted, and that through those conversations there will be some positive change is my hope, and collaboration.
mm. Well, that brings me to, after George Floyd, I mean, we've gone over this conversation a million times. That situation, I don't know if it's because everyone was kind of locked in the house and they were forced to deal with it, to watch it and actually process it. Um, it opened up so many people to what's been going on for centuries. Um, but do you think people are understanding the trauma that the Black community has been going through for generations? Like, that is George Floyd. Uh, it's almost unfortunate common to us. And
Yes.
we've learned to cope and deal with it. Not to say that we cope with it in the best way. We do the best that we can, because those kind of deaths exist in our families.
Yeah.
It's horrible. So, one, just trying to deal with trauma, period. How do you have those conversations with children? How do you have those conversations with people who aren't in the Black and brown community, who just don't get that it weighs on our soul and our spirit for generations. you know how do you have those kind of conversations, the trauma side of it? So we deal with the justice side of it, but
Yeah.
there's trauma to it that I don't think others quite understand. It's been generations of it passed down, you know.
Yeah, Malika, I can speak for myself, and not for all white people, but to say that, my own story is, and I'm embarrassed in many ways about it, is that, here I am, I am somebody who cares so much about social justice, and really have worked hard in my clinical training and in my life to have cultural awareness and sensitivity. And with this whole, and to be an ally and an advocate. And when the George Floyd murder happened, my eyes were opened in new ways and revealed my blindness as a white person. And so when you ask, like, do white people know? I don't think there's any way that, personally, I don't think there's any way that any white person could know the suffering in the Black community in the way that the people who have experienced it have experienced it. And I just have such deep respect and admiration for you and your mother, Fran Joy, and other friends of mine who are advocates in the community, and advocates for teaching history in a different way, so that, you know, our children, grandchildren will know more of a compassionate and holistic truth. Um, and I think that there's so much work for myself and for white people to do on our own racism, on having cultural humility, on having awareness, having honest conversations. I know my friend Lisa Lackey, who is a prominent Black therapist in Evanston, invited me on one of her podcasts, which was having honest conversations about race with my white friends. And she had myself and another friend of ours on, and we had some difficult conversations. And I think those are the conversations that we need to have. And me, myself, I feel like I say dumb things, I bumble. You know, even if my intentions are good, sometimes I know I say hurtful things that I don't realize because I have ignorance. And I'm grateful to my friends and my students at Northwestern and my therapy clients and people who've loved and trusted me enough to give me honest feedback so I can open my eyes. And we all need to do that, because it's man, this is crunch time for humanity, and things need to change. So, you know, I thank you for your service and your willingness to have conversations like this with people like me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's conversations to be had. I know, over the years, I know I've tried to explain how heavy it can be on the soul, and it ties into depression. Because sometimes Black women, Black men, we will find ourselves depressed, but we don't acknowledge it. We just know we have to keep going. We just have to keep going. So we stay in motion, and we don't take that time to process all the things that have happened in the present as well as the past that has been passed down. So that depression gets very heavy, but we kind of store it in the back and just keep going, and
Yeah.
that's not good, right? That's not good.
Yes, you know, my understanding in the Black community is that the stigma around getting counseling or therapy is still there. You know, I have a colleague and friend who is a Black male therapist who started a group where he and other male counselors go into barbershops and have conversations about mental health in the community, which I think is awesome, because we want to encourage everyone to get help in counseling. And I think you're right, when there's intergenerational trauma and there's loss upon loss upon loss, and you know, discrimination and racism, which is a trauma
Mm-hmm.
that you're, you know, dealing with every day, then your baseline mood, instead of maybe being here, the baseline mood for somebody with all of that trauma is going to be much lower. So you I was speaking with a Black student of mine who said that she almost doesn't really even understand depression, and my sense of it was that because she wasn't understanding it, because for her it was a way of life, like that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, brilliant woman, highly functioning. I mean, I think sometimes people have that stigma and think, oh, if you're depressed, then you're not working, you're, you know, suicidal. That's not true. we can be depressed and be like you and I, and functioning and doing stuff, but really suffering inside.
Hmm. I think that's a lot of people. I think that's a lot of people. Like, so when you had said at the beginning, I'm noticing a change in you, or I'm noticing you're going through something. Like, sometimes you can sense that energy in someone, but I mean, they just on the surface just appear like everything's normal, everything's good, everything's fine. What this person said didn't hurt me, it didn't impact me, we're good. And they'll make all the excuses in the world, but on the inside, you're dying inside. You you are hurting. You are hurting. Yes. So
You
depression comes in all levels, all degrees.
you said that you're not a therapist, Malika, but I think you're an honorary therapist because you have a lot of psychological wisdom and
Mm,
insight, and you're absolutely right. And when I work with clients like that, and usually they're trauma survivors, and they'll tell me something horrible that they went through
mm,
and have kind of flat affect, and I'll ask them, how they're feeling and doing about it, and they'll say, it's whatever. I'm okay. It's fine. It's in the past, that wall. And so my role as a therapist is to connect with their heart. And so I'll say, like, gosh, I would imagine that that must have been really terrifying or really scary for you, or that you must have been really angry. And then often the tears will fall and that mask starts to melt away.
mm,
People can start to honor their feelings, and our feelings are waves of energy that we store in the body, and if we don't honor them, I believe they turn into sickness
mm,
and physical health problems, and in addition to mental health problems. So we need to release that. We need our spiritual communities, our physical health practices, our mental health practices, to take care of ourselves and to heal from the traumas that we've survived. And I would agree that so many people are suffering.
mm, mm. Now, I know we got to wrap up. We got like 2, 3 minutes left, but I wanted to get in about the children. I know you've been fighting to get more counseling in our schools. Can you speak more to that? Because that is major. That is major.
Yes. So the research is showing that right now the stressors of the pandemic are the hardest on adolescents and young adults, and the suicide rates are the highest there. And through the American Counseling Association, I've been lobbying with my colleagues through ACA for more funding for school counselors. I think in the Chicago public schools, correct me somebody if I'm wrong, but I think they have one counselor for every 250, or it might be 350 students.
What?
Not okay.
That,
Um, Not okay.
mm-mm.
So we need more focus on early intervention and prevention, and to give kids the tools to learn how to cope with stressors and be resilient so that they can blossom into being, independent and healthy, happy, functioning adults. So yes, this is a time for kids to get services too. And the schools provide, I mean, even with the e-learning, my ETHS student talks to her school counselor once a week, and that's part of her self-care routine. So I think I encourage people to really take advantage of those resources that are there.
And what about the little ones? I hear more of the little ones, the grade schoolers. Um, they're struggling the most with e-learning.
It's so hard. I mean, they haven't learned the basic skills to learning, and then having to do that for themselves. And it's so hard for parents who are also having to work from home to find the time to sit with them. And so I think we have to do our best to provide some structure for kids because they really crave that. So
Mhm.
having, space and designated times that we're working with them on school. I think we have to dial down the expectations and not be afraid that, if they're not getting everything, that doesn't mean they're not going to be a functioning adult. every kid's probably having some deficits at this time, and together we'll work at recovery from that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Joyce. And you have a book coming out.
I do. I'm excited about it. It's coming out in July. I've been working on it for a long time. It's called The Financial Mindset Fix, a mental fitness program for an abundant life. And I'm really interested in the psychology of money as an entrepreneur and a woman. I started my business with $500 and $50,000 of debt and went through a lot of financial difficulty, thought I was going to have to file business bankruptcy, and ended up doing a lot of work on my self-esteem and learning a lot from my clients. And so this book is to help people promote their mental health and financial health. And I hope it'll be a great resource for people.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to read that. The financial mindset. I like that. Mm. Mm. So we have to wait till July.
So pre-sales will be in May, and
Okay.
a text campaign. If people would like to join my email database, they can text mental health to the number 33777, and then you'll get updates about the book and be able to connect with me on social media and my website. I try to provide resources and articles and videos to help people feel better during this challenging time.
Okay. Now, money talks. So I know people will want you to come back and talk about that book because I do believe that there's a spiritual, psychological connection to how people deal with money.
Absolutely. See, there's wisdom again, Malika. It's energy, right? So
Mhm.
it's an exchange. And so there's just I'm very interested in the psychology of money and our relationships with money and our beliefs about what is possible and how that shapes our financial reality.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Joyce, as always. I
Thank you.
learned more from you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I learn from you every time I talk with you too, having me,
All right.
being a
So,
light in the community.
oh, thank you. Thank you. And so are you. I get the feeling, yeah, you're probably going to get some calls. People are in need, and you are such a compassionate person. So, thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye bye. Okay, this is Malika, Evanston Live TV, and that was psychotherapist Joyce Marter. I'll be sure to put her contact information in the description and her upcoming book, all about money, the psychology behind money. How do you deal with money on a spiritual, emotional level? Yeah, that's something to think about. But she definitely gave us some great information to get us through this COVID 19, to get us through all this uncertainty that we're experiencing. She's always a pleasure and just a compassionate human being. That's always refreshing to talk to. All right, you all be safe out there and stay tuned for more on Evanston Live TV.